I think we are live.
Yes, we are.
Hello, all my effect enjoyers.
Hello, hello, everyone.
Welcome back to Office Hours.
Today we
missed
got
you
a
all.
faster than ever YouTube. Yeah, it's nice to have you back.
It is good to be back. Hello, effect creators.
Hello, effect creator.
Hello.
Hello, Lloyd and Robert.
All right. I think I got all my windows in the right spot. What is going on, everyone? I don't think that we have any particular agenda for today. No guests or anything like that. So I think today we can look at code and chat about code. Where's my Office Hours channel? So if you all have code you want us to take a look at or review, or if you have things you want us to talk about, let us know and we can take questions. But yeah, we don't have anything specific planned for today.
Let's see. I got some code.
If you have some code, drop it in the Office Hours channel in Discord so we can take a look. If you have anything you want us to look at. And specific questions are always better than like, hey, just take a look at this. So if there are like particular modules that you wanted us to look at or whatever, you'll probably get better feedback. What is the team's feels on the state of beta to RC? The team's feels are that we're close.
Yes.
We are close. Let me drop the link. I'll make a thread, actually. Create thread. Effect Office Hours 36. Put your Office Hours questions in this thread. Let me send a link. Copy link. Hopefully my link doesn't get deleted by the admins. This has to be the most stable beta I've ever used. That's good to hear. Genuinely great job. Thank you. Well, we've got a good team of folks working on effect. So, but yeah, we're close to RC. Yes. So keep an eye out. I dropped a link into the Discord thread you folks can use. If you have code that you want us to review, I don't know. I hope my link didn't get deleted, but if you're in Discord and you go to the Office Hours channel, there's a thread in there for Office Hours 36 that you can use. We can take a look at code, or we can just answer questions. So if you have questions about effect stuff, put them in chat now, or forever hold your peace.
That sounds like extreme.
That's right. Drop your questions or don't talk to me.
Yeah. I see that someone is writing, so I think in a few seconds we will receive something to discuss.
Clean up all my windows. Why do I have so many windows open?
Well.
Drop your question or die. New hat. That's right. Actually, I'm not wearing my effect hat. You're right. One second.
Yeah.
Gotta put on the OG hat today. Highly limited edition.
You know what? I'll join you as well.
By far, my favorite modules are Schema, HTTP, and the CLI. I absolutely love the new CLI. I'm glad. Kit actually put a lot of work into that, and then I sort of took it over and polished it up. So I'm glad that I hope everybody's enjoying the new CLI. I'm particularly happy that the output of the CLI is controllable now, because I got quite a bit of memeing thrown at me, quite a bit of flack, quite a bit of flaming for the old CLI output, the double-spaced output. There were quite a few double-spaced Twitter threads that I got tagged in to tell me how much people enjoyed the double spacing. Lloyd, I had a question in the dev tool channel from Mattia about his talk at Effect Milan about tapping agents into the OTel channel. If he'd like to elaborate further, exaberate further, or show his setup. If you have, so I guess Mattia, maybe you could fill everybody in, and then if you wanted to elaborate, and then Robert, we'll get to your question that's in Discord for sure.
So let's jump to the question first, if I recall that correctly. The question was basically about.
Wait, before you keep going, Mattia, is Mattia quiet for everybody else, or is it just me? I've been having trouble with my headphones lately.
Let me double check also that it picked up the correct microphone, because it would not be the first time that it picks up the wrong microphone. Let me just wait for feedback from folks, just to understand.
Sounds fine to me.
Okay.
It might just be on my end, Mattia.
Okay. So,
all right, go for it.
So basically, elaborating on what was the question. So the question was basically, after Lloyd watching the talk that I did at Effect Milan, which was really an additional elaboration on the one that we did here on stream that Maxwell initially did. And basically, in that talk, I describe how Effect helps building the next generation of software, because Effect has this prime ability of basically have built-in observability. Like having built-in observability is something which is like the first like citizen you want to get if you want to have software that self-heals, or additionally that provides feedbacks for self-debugging itself. Whenever something goes wrong, you can basically just tell the agent, hey, here's where you can like grab your own telemetry of what happened, and then you can basically like let the agent do its job and try to make assumption, try to change the code, run it again with the observability, even in your dev environment, and then ship it to production, and then observe it in production in order in the following days to be sure that your software does not degenerate, or maybe you fix something but then you create issues somewhere else. And so that topic, the question Lloyd gave was, the Effect dev tools for VS Code show and are already able to collect telemetry via the debugger protocol that's built in VS Code. So if you take the Effect dev tools right now from VS Code and then you run an Effect v3 code base, you can basically show and see your traces in there without having like a full-blown observability set up for your local development. So the question was, how can I get that same behavior to my agent without basically copy and pasting the spans I see and passing them into my agent prompt? And what I described in the talk is basically we have like two approaches. The one is the more standard one, which is basically to have your own container that runs, for example, OpenTelemetry, LGTM. I don't even remember every time what it's: Loki, Tempo, Grafana, and Mir. And that basically provides you an image that you can run your machine, and it already pre-configured with everything you need. And then what you can use to give your agent access to that telemetry collected in that image is to use Grafana GCX, which is an awesome CLI that basically allows you to configure Grafana sources and then use GCX to basically perform queries over the remote Grafana storage. And that is great. And that works really well if you are debugging a situation that's connected to spans, traces, and metrics, whatever, that are well behaving. Because the thing is that the problem with the observability platform is that by default, observability and telemetry collection is basically done in batches. So what happens is that there is a collector that collects some events, and that eventually they get flushed away. And so what I was describing in my talk is that what if we can reuse the same approach of abusing of the debugging connection to also collect telemetry data as thing happens. That has the benefit that things, for example, like shutdown bugs that may happen in your application or whatever, would be more likely to be collected, because thanks to the debugger connection does not suffer the problem of whenever you send something over the debugger connection, it may fail, be closed in between, and not be transmitted, because the way that the debugger works is that there is basically an in the middle process that sits between where your JavaScript execution lives and where your debugger connects, and that gives an additional trust of that. But there is no standard protocol that allows that. So what I have described in my talk is an experimental tool I have been working on that's called Inspect. And maybe share real quick my screen just to every time share screen. This one.
Is it called Inspect or Inspect?
Inspect. I play around the wording of inspecting and also effect, so inspect. And basically what this tool does is a CLI you can run, and maybe I can also show that as well. Let me just do some real quick window management. Let me double check. Open folder.
The chat is saying that the naming is pretty ace.
And also, yes. I hate. Just me give a sec, please. My window management is, as always, the worst. Yeah. Let me open any project I may have. Text in here. I remember. Yeah, I need to find one. Maybe I can do that later, because I do not find any good typed HTTP API. Maybe this one is good. I was looking for some example of effect I had with already some. Yeah, this could work. Yeah. And basically, the Inspect is basically this CLI that you can run. And by running this CLI, you basically can prefix any node or bun working process. You can basically run npx inspect node your server.ts or whatever. And what happens behind the scene is that basically it will automatically start a telemetry collector over the debug protocol, start collecting things like, for example, your telemetry, your metrics, and whatever. And then when it shuts down, it uses a local SQLite database in order to allow through the same CLI.
Mattia, are we supposed to be seeing what you're seeing?
Sorry, not
All
yet.
I see is the browser window right now.
Yeah, sorry. Let me double check. Okay, it should be now. I hate when Riverside does that. Yes, sure. It should be now.
Yep, got it.
It should be, okay. And in theory, if I am correct, not sure if it works, run this rc server.ts with npx inspect in order to collect telemetry in background, then call any API, shut the server, and list me the spans. Let's see if it's clever enough to do that. Maybe I should also increase a little the font size.
Probably another tick or two.
Yeah. Let me also see it like that.
Also, while this is running, I'll just answer a question in Discord.
Yeah, no.
There was a question about how we decide between data.taggedError and schema.taggedError. In general, the docs show a bunch of ways to do things, but no clear comparison or clues what to use when. I think we're going to try to improve upon this for the docs with V4 when we get into RC and stability for V4, but until that point in time, I would say most of the time you can lean into schema.taggedError because it gives you everything that data.taggedError does. The times where I use data.taggedError are few, but generally speaking, I lean into data.taggedError if the errors are always going to be internal to my program. So like if I'm never doing anything with those errors except managing them within my own application. Otherwise, if the errors ever need to go over the wire or be printed to the screen or anything else, I use schema.taggedError because you get obviously the encoding of the error as well. So my rule of thumb is like generally, if the error is totally internal to my app, I use data.taggedError. Otherwise, I use schema.taggedError for everything else. But again, that's just my convention. If you want something even easier, you could just use schema.taggedError for everything because it encompasses everything that data.taggedError does, and then also gives you like all the schema stuff on top of it. So
yeah, it turns out that maybe I'm not lucky. I thought that I had this small project in a working state, but it seems it's not the case, unfortunately. But yeah, basically the issue, the gist is that, as you can see, what the agent did with that is basically run the inspect help and it find out the comments, and then I've shown that you can run npx inspect run, and you can run, for example, any command you want after that. And you can see that it learned that. You can also like provide the path where you want to store the data. Then you can use traces and trace to like look into the traces. And then I was not lucky because probably I messed up with my local ports. But yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not lucky today. Yeah.
Sometimes it happens, man. Live demos.
Yeah. They always broke.
Is it safe to use schema.taggedError everywhere, just in case I might need to use one of those errors in future workflows? Yes. Just if you want a simple rule of thumb, just use schema.taggedError or schema in V4 schema.taggedError class, I think it's called. Is there a target date or an estimated time frame for the V4 RC? Soon. We said that earlier, but soon. Stay tuned. We're working on it, so keep an eye out. There was a question in my Twitch channel from Plague FPS who asks, excuse me, with the TypeScript v7 RC, do I still need a special TypeScript version to have the LSP work when running the new go backed TSC command? I guess that's a question for Matthias. So the question is, with the v7 RC of TypeScript, do you still need a special TypeScript version to have the LSP work when running the TSC command?
With the new version 7, RC, you need to use the effect/TSGO package, not anymore the effect language service one, because that one is for the old Strada version, so that works up until the version 6. Starting from version 7 RC going forwards, you need to use the effect/TSGO, and the effect/TSGO command. The effect/TSGO setup command also automatically recognize if you are using the 7.0 RC or if you are running still on the nightly builds for effect/TSGO, which personally I still recommend, because I found that there are more bug fixes there, and the current RC unfortunately has still quite a lot of rough edges that have been fixed over the nightlies. And then it will automatically pick and patch the correct version based on the one that you are using.
Cool. Let me see if there's any other questions we missed before we launch into looking at some code from Robert. Mattia, tagged error questions. Okay. Keep dropping questions in chat as you guys have them, and we'll try to make sure we get to all of them. In the meantime,
I think that 99% of people are still blocked from use v4.
99% of people are blocked from using v4 because Drizzle hasn't implemented v4. I'm just kidding. Drizzle actually has v4 integration now, but 99% of people are blocked because it's still in beta, because it doesn't have an RC tag next to it.
Well,
my favorite so there are some folks I've spoken with who really want to use v4, but their companies have like a policy against using beta software, and so they can't use it, so they're still stuck on v3. And my favorite like thing to ask them is, well, are you using Effect v3 platform or Effect v3 CLI or Effect v3 any of the other ecosystem packages, which are also like totally experimental in beta? Like just like they have a version tag, but none of them have any majors except for Effect, like the Effect package. So anyway, I always think that that's funny, literally just because of the beta tag. 99% of people are blocked from upgrading to v4. Anyway, stay tuned. RC is coming. We're working on it, so keep your ears open.
Yeah.
Robert asked us to take a look at his project. Robert Pitt. Tell me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. He says he's been building an interesting project that uses Git as its durable storage. Take a look at the Git-DB package and feel free to give me some direction pointers. Honestly, you can take a look to find something worth reviewing, but even I'm looking at the code thinking it's barely readable at the moment. Feel free to skip or find a good example. Okay, well, we'll look at it. And we'll see if we can find something. Let me share my screen. And share window. For now, I'll just share my window. Let me make this bigger. That's the wrong window that I'm increasing the size of. Cool. Now Riverside is enormous.
Okay.
Now with AI, it's easy to migrate stuff anyway. Yeah, AI does a pretty good job with v3 to v4 migration. There are a couple of like gotchas with schema, like some of the renamings. You have to be a little bit careful because the encoded side of schema, like the naming convention changed a little bit. And actually, I think Julio has a pretty good document in here, packages, effect, source, no, packages, and we need to clean all this up before we do anything. But in this schema migration thing, he talks about like simple renames as well as like the more complex migrations. But one of the things that you'll notice right off the bat going from v3 to v4 schema is that the like from self suffix, which like indicates a schema that goes from big int to big int, it's like the same type on the encoded and decoded side, are in v4 they're named to remove the from self suffix. So like big int, symbol, redacted, result, all of this stuff has been changed. What's the minimum TypeScript version for Effect v4? I think we test on, do we document that? We don't. I think we test on everything going back to 5.6. Hang on. Type test. Where's the configuration file for this? I think it's in our workflow. Check types. So greater than or equal to 5.8 we test against right now. There's a reason for this too. I think this has to do with uint data array typings in Node.js or something, or in TypeScript. I forget exactly, but we test against everything greater than or equal to TypeScript 5.8. So like all of our type tests run against all versions beyond this. So if you're curious, you can look at our GitHub Actions and look at the check workflow, which runs type tests here. So you can see like which TypeScript versions we're checking against in here. What is the value of from self codec? Some of them are not even serializable. Well, there are cases where you need a codec from self, like a codec that describes itself, because you can't actually build further schemas like that decode for example, like from a string to a big int. You literally can't build that schema without doing a transformation to a like from self schema. So if you look at the internals and like how those schemas are actually defined, those transforms are defined, you'll see why they're necessary. And actually, if you try to build your own transform from like a string to some other non-serializable type, you'll also get an intuition for why they're necessary. But I'm not going to go into it right now because I promised Robert I'd look at his code. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any questions. GitHub has storage. Anyway, let's take a look at some code here. Also, Plarpy69, thank you very much for the sub on Twitch. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate the support. Also, great username. Robert, if there's a particular module in here that's better to start with, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to take a look at, I don't know, document and see. So, we've got this document type, which has some bytes. It has an object ID and it has a path. Parse document JSON. So one thing, this.text. So you could encode this whole sequence of transformations, Robert. You could encode this through schema as like a document from bytes schema where you transform from the raw bytes to the eventual like document itself. So like the transformation would go on the encoded side, you'd have a uint data array, right? You'd have the bytes themselves. And then on the decoded side, you'd have the shape of the document. So this schema right here. And then the transform would just be responsible for doing these two steps. But because schema is JSON native by default, you can actually encode the JSON parsing into schema as well.
But wait a second. Isn't bytes the content of the document? I mean, or am I reading? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
but you could still do this transform. You could take a uint array and transform it into this structure. Oh, I see what you're saying, Mattia.
You would need to what you could do, you can probably create like a static helper that creates on the fly like a schema that has always the same like basic fields, or even you can even using like the spread fields for the bytes, the object ID, and the path, or you can take a schema in there and then you can like generate on the fly.
Does this use v4? Yes.
Yeah.
What you can do here also, like if you want to make it the smallest change possible to make this work a little bit better with schema, one thing you could do, this is synchronous. So you could do, let me change my window so that you can see my terminal as well. Hang on. Oh, can I like dynamically switch screens? No, I can't. Okay.
Don't ask too much.
All right, Riverside, whatever. So one thing you could do is effect. So one of the things you could do here is you have this like JSON method on your document here. So this is right now just like a method sitting here, and you're passing the type T and sort of just like relying on this being the correct type. One thing you could do is if we simulate your method here, function, I don't know, let's just do this for a second. So one thing you could do is say T extends, what is it called? Top?
Constraint.
I think there's a new constraint thingy now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, lightweight structural constraint for APIs that accept schema values only but read their data. Let's call this S. So instead of just taking T as a type parameter, you could also accept a schema in here. And then in here, decode unknown sync schema. Constraint decoder. Okay. Why can't I pass this like this? What am I doing that's dumb, Mattia?
You have from JSON. You take any schema.
Let's just use top.
Oh yeah.
No, that doesn't work either. Constraint decoder.
Oh, constraint codec maybe, because actually you need to have a codec to be able to decode an unknown and decode. Constraint is just.
Can I do this? No.
No, because you need a codec, right? So probably you should use constraint codec.
But I just want the most generic schema possible, which I used to be able to do with top. Interesting.
Constraint decoder, yeah.
Okay, let's try it. And someone help me.
You need to pass never. The schema that you are using, you need to pass. Yeah.
But it defaults to never, no?
It should, yeah.
Read the error, LOL. Mike, that's not helpful. I don't want to read the error.
Top is not assignable to that because top encoder.
I think my LSP died. Hang on. Yeah, LSP died.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Constraint is new. Someone in chat said, I did not know about constraint. I've still been using schema.top. Constraint is new, I think.
It has been introduced, I think, after some like attempt to improve the type level performance of the schema types.
I'm getting flamed in my Twitch chat for not knowing Vim commands. I did try LSP restart, which said that there was no LSP running. So anyway, okay. So now we can pass. So this thing from JSON would now actually return a function. If we look, if we call it with like, I don't know. Let's just make a. So you could do something like this, which again is basically just delegating to this. So you could like in here, since you have access to the text, like we'll just assume that you have access to the text here. Text string. So right now this won't work. Well, it will be fine because I'm decoding from unknown, right? But the schema won't necessarily know how to decode from a string to what I want. What does constraint decoder allow me to do? What is T? Language type views, but do not need the full schema protocol. So one thing you could do is you could make the constraint here. You could leave it as unknown and then internally do this. Right? Where this from JSON string turns this schema into something that converts from JSON into this schema. The other thing you could do is adjust the generic constraints to represent a codec that goes from a string to some type T or whatever, and you could encode that type. Like you could basically, you could adjust the generic parameters if you want, or you could do it this way. The point being is you could remove this unsafe cast by leveraging schema if you want to. And you could refactor the decoding of a document, this parsing of a document, to be fully encased in schema as a transformation if you want to. You don't have to. Just like showing a different way of doing this. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do it that way, Robert. It's just that I tend, if I'm already using schema, I tend to just like lean into it. So it really depends on like what the type that you're receiving is going to look like. If you're always going to be getting text, then you could force the user to pass a codec that knows how to go from string to unknown, and do it this way. But anyway, there's like you could do codec. Oh wait. Something like this, and then that would force the user to pass a schema that already knows how to do the string conversion. Anyway, different ways of doing it, but this could be a nice way to lift everything into schema, because then you get like richer errors. So you can encode like more information into the errors that you're getting back if something fails to decode or something like that. All right, what is this? We've got events. I don't know what these events do. guess this is like representing particular things that can happen to
documents.
I guess, or maybe to a store. Let's look at store first. This might have been a mistake. Check the README for context. GitDB is a small effect service for storing append-only application event files in Git objects without touching the normal source control workflow. It provides raw tree blob transactions, snapshots, pointers, history, diff, sync, and an event helper API used by Cycle Database. The durable cycle data model is event sourced. Got it. It's an event source store thingy. Ticket events are sharded by the ticket ID segment, so the ticket aggregate tree does not grow into one directory with every ticket in the repository. Event identity. Canonical JSON payloads unintentionally omit the generated timestamp. Blah, 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 blah. This lets Git deduplicate common operations that have identical content. Okay. So an example of usage would be you have your GitDB store, you start a transaction, you append an event, and then you commit the transaction. Okay, that's cool. Store is the service construction raw transactions. Mike is going to love this comment. How do I get good at programming like Mattia and Max? I can't even say Tim, Mike, or Julio because they're on another level. We're like here, but Mike and Tim and Julio are like here. I'm just
I would
kidding.
say that there is Mattia, then there's Max, and then the rest.
No. I live on the ground floor. I pretend. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Gotta build stuff. That's the only way to get good. Just find a problem and solve it. That was really good. I really wish Mike was on stream for that one. Let's look at the store construction. I'm curious now.
So basically, just to understand. So basically, this is event sourced append only storage for events that's driven by Git repositories, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, I think this is like a durable event store that uses Git for like
a storage provider.
For storage, and then I think also for like transactionality, maybe. Hang on. Where was the?
Yeah, that was yeah.
Append only application event files and Git objects. Let's Git deduplicate. Yeah, it uses Git for deduplication. It's interesting. Before I answer that question, Robert, there was another question about schema from Daniello who says, my point is that whatever from self is kind of a niche use case, and having the most sensible name pointing to that will be confusing. I don't understand the issue is that. I think that we had the opposite problem before. I think from self made almost no sense. And people were using the wrong schemas for operations that they should not have been. And they were getting confused when they were trying to go for, like, you would use schema.date, for example, and you'd encode it and you'd get like something weird that you weren't expecting. Now, if you use schema big int or schema whatever, you get the same, like the type on the encoded side is more semantic, and converting to something like JSON or whatever is just wrapping it into another schema.
And also, like, that opens to the thing that, let's say that, for example, you say that you have schema.date. From what I understand from the question, you expect that schema to have on the encoded side something like, let's say, the UTC string, but that's not the only way to encode a date. You can use like millis, nanos, whatever. How do we pick the one that users should use? We can't get a sensible default. So it's better to use that name for the symmetric one, I would call that. I'm not sure if that's how it's called, but basically the one that has the same type on both. And then you have date from list, date from UTC, date from string, whatever.
Yeah, v4 schema tries to be like very pragmatic and allow you to control what's happening. Damn, no Z in the editor selection for effect TSGO, Mattia.
So, no Z, sorry?
He said there was a comment in my Twitch saying that that there's no Z in the selector in the effect TSGO setup command. You could probably doesn't Z.
I thought it was added recently, so that's surprising. I thought that it was added recently. I'll check that out.
Robert asked, I think my question about GitDB is how you would approach this problem within effects system. Robert, can you clarify a little more? Are you asking like how we would do this without like a backend like Git, or maybe you could give us a little more context on that question before we dive further into the code. While we're waiting for Robert, I will maybe just look at an example in Schema so that maybe people can get a bit more of an intuition for this, but let's go to effect. Actually, I'm just going to navigate in the code. So let's look at BigInt. So you see in the type that the BigInt like type that represents this BigInt schema here represents a schema that goes from BigInt to BigInt. And the whole point of this is that you're just validating that the input type is a BigInt. There's no parsing or anything like that. You're literally just validating that the input type is a BigInt. Maybe an even better example is something that doesn't use make. What's a good example? Something that's non-native. Date. Where's our date? Const date. No, this uses instance of. I mean, this is still like a good example, I guess, but you want to have a schema that validates that the type is a date, right? Because then once you have a schema that validates that the type is a date, then you can build transformations on top of this. So for example, date from string decodes a string into a date, right? And so we've got this date string schema, which is a string that has a special annotation on it, a string schema that has a special annotation on it, which you then decode into a date. There'd be no way of doing this if we didn't have schemas that just represented like the type itself, right? Because you're saying take a string this date string is literally just a string with special annotations on it, right? We looked at this. It's a string schema with an annotation on it. Take a string, decode it into a date using this transformation, date from string. Okay, fine. But once we've done that transform, how do we then validate we have a date, right? You need a schema that represents just a date. If the encoded side of this was a string, this wouldn't work. So anyway, the from self suffixes were removed in v4 to make it clearer. And schemas that are doing transforms now have more semantic names. So in v3, schema.date took a string and converted it to a schema to a date. Now date from string is what does that, right? So like the whole point of these renames was to remove ambiguity and make it very clear what's going on. Hello, Ion, or at Ion. What module should I use if I need storage with a time to live? Cache and RC map have a lookup function, so they're not just storage. Persistence is something I found, but I'm not sure. Persistence is what you need. Persistence is a like a generic abstraction over like persisted information, but you create like a store that's scoped by a primary key, and then like when you read and write information to the store, you can specify time to live and things like that. So I think that maybe an easy way to exemplify this, or maybe a good way, I think key value store uses persistence, maybe, or you can build a persistence out of a key value store. Key value, yeah. So you have like a backing persistence layer that you implement, and backing persistence is like a service that allows you to create a store, a backing persistence store, from a particular identifier. And then once you've created this, then you get this interface, which is the thing that allows you to read, write, remove, clear that store. So you kind of like have stores that are scoped to a particular key, a primary key or a particular key. If you think about it in terms of like key value store, you have like, or if you think about it in terms of like the file system, you'd have like, you know, store one with file A, and then, right. So yeah, if you need storage with a time to live, like if you need persistence with a TTL, persistence is what you should look at. I'm trying to, okay, Robert answered back about the GitDB stuff. I'm trying to reduce down the GitDB package into a pure effect design. What would be the modules you would choose from effect only to build out event sourcing flow to the file system? But like my point was, do you still want to use Git, right? To do this? Like you still want the whole Git flow thing that you've got going on here, using Git as your like persistence layer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any like major issues with the way that you've designed this. The README itself here looks pretty effect idiomatic to me. The only thing you might, I don't know if it's, go ahead, Monsieur.
Probably the only thing that I'm not sure about from the design that I see in here is that probably like things like there is like gitdb event.append. They all seems like static methods exposed by the actual APIs. I'm not sure if maybe one should lean more into moving them into a layer, and then also one could maybe decide that you want to support like persistence does, something like a typed shape for the events that are allowed to go in and out of that event store, and maybe one could explore more about that. But otherwise, I think that is a solid start, and whatever design you take is only like attempting to push more the compile time boundaries security you get. Like for example, said before, like maybe you can have your own way of defining, maybe before creating like a store, you would add like a storage, a concept of event storage, and then a concept of like an event group, for example, for all of the events that can be related to something, and then maybe you attach a schema to each event group, and then whenever you persist, you get for free automatically basically converting that event back and forth, which is nice also because with schema, the problem with event logs is that given it's append only, the problem is always versioning, and the only kind of versioning you can really do is like forward only. And Schema has this nice ability that you can have like, as an encoded side, you could have like the shape of version 1 of the event unioned with version 2, with version 3, etc. And at runtime, you get always maybe the latest updated shape. And I think that there are quite few examples in, I think there is an stable module, event journal, EventLog, and
So
that
like
is.
you could take, exactly, like Mattia's saying, we do have the concept of like an event log and associated like events and things like that in effect already. So you could take some inspiration here or see if you can build on top of it, right? Like you could maybe try to look at seeing if you could. The version issue you raised is a concern I'm looking to handle. Yeah, I mean, so you could look and see, do the primitives that we give you in effects event log allow you to address some of those issues you were saying, but like we have the concept of an event log with a journal, et cetera, in effect already. And there's quite a bit that's gone into this over time. Tim's put quite a bit of effort into this. So you could look at like whether or not you could utilize something like this for your durable event log. Like, can you build on top of this or not? Without being able to do that, like if you can't use this, I mean, I don't really see any major issues with the API you've exposed here. Like, I agree with Mattia that you could potentially have like some sort of constructor that allows you to create a store from a schema, right? So that then your payload is typed.
But that's an
I don't know.
improvement. It's fine
Yeah, I mean,
as it is as well. Yeah.
Same thing with like transactions. Instead of transactions being something you have to manually pass around and commit, you could consider having the transaction be something that's in the environment, like we do with
The SQL
STM,
module, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, or even like STM, where the transaction is something that's environmental, and then you provide the transaction to commit it, right? So like this could be something that's just propagated through the environment, and then any events that are yielded within that program get it appended to the transaction that's eventually provided to that effect program. Things you could do to like improve the API and lean more into what effect already provides for you. The other benefit you get for like for that is transactions being scoped. So like I don't know if these transactions are already scoped. We can maybe even take a look. But let's see if start. What was the name of the begin? Yeah, so like I would have transactions be scoped. So like there should be a scope here, because let's say that I don't know, the program gets interrupted or something like that, this transaction would never close. So like you maybe want to think about like what should happen if the transaction is interrupted, right? Would you roll back? Would you commit any events that have been appended till then? So those are some other things you could consider here.
Yeah, basically more, instead of like, another approach could also be like, as you mentioned before, like the STM module does, to completely avoid like the problem of leaving like the scope open or whatever. You can redesign the API to be something like with transaction, and that with transaction is just a function that takes in an effect, provides the transaction service, and then returns back the effect without the transaction service. And then whatever is done in between basically will automatically omit if the effect succeeds, or rollbacks if the effect fails, things like that. I think that, as you mentioned before, the STM module, or I think also like how internally is built as well, the SQL client module, because the SQL client module also has an API that allows you to do basically both the transaction and without the transaction one. which could be the same also like for your event log, because maybe you have events that you just commit and that's it. You don't care about opening a transaction because you don't want maybe to burden with whatever machinery you would do behind the scene for a transaction, maybe in some cases.
There was a comment also about unrelated, but it would be nice to have a video which walks you through a minimal implementation of something like fibers, gen, and run promise from scratch to help the viewer understand how the sausage is made. Well, it just so happens that where's effect? Somewhere in here. So Kit has a video on his own YouTube somewhere about or even it might even be on our YouTube somewhere. Hang on, let me see.
I think it wasn't.
Anyway, somewhere in here, there's a video that Kit did. It's either on our YouTube or on his YouTube, where he walks through building up like a very simple effect system. But even beyond that, there was a video Mike did with us a while back. How the just searching for the fuck. Some way back when, called "What the fuck is a fiber?" or something like that. Where are you? Where are you? Here we go. Back when effect office hours was called effect time. Here.
That was a good time.
Good times. We walked through like a very basic implementation of like what a fiber is, what an effect system does behind the scenes. Like, so basically at Ion, like the question you just asked, watch this video. This is like a much older like video, and like I said, Kit has another one out there that talks about like laziness and how that gives effect pretty much all the power and properties that it has as an effect system. But yeah. Question: how much code are you all writing by hand versus agentic? I've been out of the industry for a while and trying to see how important agentic is for getting back into the industry. It's definitely very important.
Yeah.
There's still quite a bit of code that we write by hand, because a lot of the library level code, we use AI to help us, but we still like refine it by hand. But I think all of us are sort of getting used to writing a lot of code in an agentic manner because it's just the way that our job is now. Yes, a lot of people are also at Ion recommending Kit's Thunk video, kitlangton.com.
Thunk. There it is.
There it is. This. Oh, God. I don't know if you guys could hear Kit's sultry voice or if that just came through my headphones. But
hello.
Kit has a few really good videos as well. There's the Thunk one scratch. He's got a few good videos in here. Kit ASMR, indeed. Space Motion also says it's very important to know when and when not to rely on agentic coding. I agree. I think that's a skill that we're all still kind of learning. And also knowing like how to learning how to interact with the agent in a way that works for you, because like I think the same workflows don't work the same for everybody. But I don't want to spend another like whole office hours talking about AI coding. I think we've talked enough about AI coding on this office hours channel. But anyway, going back to Robert's code base here, I think what I like is that it's built in a manner that leans into the things that Effect is good at, right? It's built using the service pattern. It's oriented around services, so things are pluggable. I think there are a few things like we talked about that could be done to improve or make the library better, but yeah, another thing that I see here is a lot of these like thunks that return effects. And we've talked before about how this is kind of an anti-pattern. If you have a function that takes no arguments and you return an effect from it, that's the same as just returning the effect. Unless you're doing synchronous work in here before you return the effect. That's like the only case I can think of where this is fine. Like I use this pattern on our new website. I re-implemented Kit's. For all of you who are familiar with Kit, his visual effect library, he built like a whole custom framework to do this, and then I rebuilt it using Effect Atom. So this is a private repo, but I'm showing it to you all because I trust you. Plus, it's going to be public at some point in the near future, anyways. But
in 5 seconds, when we're going to be live.
New website when?
When?
99% of users are blocked on upgrading to V4 because we don't have a new website yet.
Oh my god.
What was I talking about?
This has become a meme.
This has become a meme, yes. Somewhere in here that I don't remember. Here, define example. There are like the one case I can think of where like a synchronous, the forbidden website, indeed. The one case I can think of where having a thunk that returns an effect is fine is when you need to do synchronous work before returning the effect. So in this case, it is a function that accepts options. But like, let's say it was just a thunk that returns an effect, but I needed to do synchronous work before I return that effect because I need something to happen outside the effect system. That's the only case I can think of. But like most of the time, where was it? Most of the time, this is an anti-pattern.
And also, as you mentioned, you need to also be aware that whatever you put outside of there is usually something that would not be performed on retries. So you should like be very aware that whatever you put there, you may be like shooting yourself in the foot because then eventually you put retries on something that caused that, and if it's not wrapped by a suspend or whatever, you basically lose the retries because they will be executed only once when you actually construct the effect program. So you need to be careful. But yeah, that's a pattern to do.
I won't say a word to Mike. I can't believe it's real. I thought the new website was just a dream. The tales of this project, I thought I would never see it. Yes, it exists. Anyway, I for the new website a long time ago, I rebuilt Kit's effect visualizer thingy, but with Effect Atom, like fully with Effect V4 and fully with Effect Atom, because I thought it would be a good showcase when we made the repo public of like what you can do with Atom. Anyway, are there any best practices for Effect Atom? I feel like Effect Atom gives too much freedom that I don't have enough skill to control, and AI also goes crazy. Yeah, I think AI goes crazy because the APIs are still young, and we are still like refining them, and the patterns are not as well established.
And also, like there are. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say for best practices. You maybe you answer first, Mattia, and then I'll talk about like one. It's not a best practice, but it's a pattern I've been leaning into with Atom when I use it. So go ahead.
I would say also that one of the problem also with Atom is that it is like a front-end library mainly, and the issue is that it tries to get the interop with existing like front-end components. Could be Vue, could be React, could be whatever. And the issue is that even there are no like standards on how, for example, to express things like, for example, an asynchronous action that may need to show a spinner and whatever. Some components, for example, accept like a lazy promise that are maybe third-party components. I am speaking obviously, and some others maybe rely on callbacks. Some others rely on controlled state that need to be provided out there. And the issue is that obviously that mirrors into the LLM trying so much of those patterns depending on which component it has to deal with, and then it kind of automatically degenerates. And one thing you can do is to try to instruct the LLM to, hey, these are the 3 golden patterns I want to use usually. For example, I really like the use atom pattern that returns like the async result and the function that could be invoked either to kick off the execution or reset or interrupt. I really like that because it gives you basically synchronous controls that you can observe and subscribe to, rather than, for example, like converting the atom function into a mode promise, for example, that for the right side of atom. For the read side, I found out that I think at least for the read side of atom, usually it plays nicer. But yeah.
There were a bunch of questions that came in. Has Effect Atom been benchmarked against other signaling libraries? No, we're not focused on benchmarks for Atom at the moment, because it's still pretty like early and experimental, and we're still like figuring out if it makes sense and is going to be the way that we do things, or if it's not. But we think Atom is pretty nice to use once you sort of like get used to using it. But we also know that the API needs a ton of work, and that's why it's still marked as unstable. Are there any good repos that use Atom in production? Obviously, Website V2 is private for now. Yeah, Website V2 uses Atom very heavily. So when it's public, it'll be a good reference. Reese's Answer Overflow also uses Atom, I'm pretty sure. Atom. Yeah. So he uses, I'll link this in the chat for folks. There are other ones. So you could use like grep.app or similar if you wanted to, and search for like the V3 version of Effect Atom, or you can search for the V4 version, which is under Effect Unstable Reactivity Atom. So it looks like T3 Code is also using Atom, which is cool. I know Maple uses Atom. At some point we'll have why is their name escaping me? Oh God. Forgive me. We'll have the author of Maple on at some point, but I'm not sure why their name is escaping me right now. Jesus. Forgive me.
It's Makisua?
David. Yes, Makisua, but David is their name. Anyway, yeah, there are projects that use Atom in production. T3 Code is probably a good reference, or actually, wait, T3 Code this is just their reference to our repo. so maybe not actually using it. Reese, Answer Overflow definitely uses Atom. But anyway, the pattern I was going to talk about is something called, I don't know if we have a name for it really, but like before I had been like using atoms much, like putting quite a bit of logic into the atoms themselves for like doing state management and whatnot. And then I started, after talking to Tim a little bit, using this other pattern where I actually have a service. So in this case, this is like my visual effect manager service, the thing that controls the state of all the visual effects on the page. And so I've got a service here, and I actually control the atoms from the service. And so what do I mean by that? Well, a atom gets stored in an atom registry. And when you create an atom runtime using atom.runtime out of a layer, so it's somewhere in here in this project, probably in UI, maybe? No, probably in runtime. Somewhere in here. Somewhere in here. I don't know where. This was like quite a bit of experimentation, so I don't have the project structure is not the greatest, but somewhere in here I create an atom runtime out of the layer for this service. And when you do that, the layer automatically gets provided the registry, the atom registry. So any service you're going to use in an atom runtime, you can like access the atom registry. And what's cool about this is then all of the logic for updating those atoms, you can just put in the service instead of putting them in the atoms themselves. So like, for example, here, when I want to set the state of an example, I get the state of the example, so the atom itself. Then I get the actual value of the atom by accessing it from the registry. Because like when you can use the registry synchronously to get and set and update the values of atoms, which is really cool. Instead of doing all this work from within the atoms themselves, I'm just doing it in the service. And because I have access to the registry, I can do it synchronously. So I get the previous value, then I set the value of the atom, and then I play a transition using those values. And you'll see a lot of that type of logic in here where I'm like accessing for a step and like then setting a new value for that step or something like that. So the general pattern here that I've been leaning into is like a service that serves as the controller for one or more atoms. And so in this case, my atoms are defined in a separate file. They're in like this state file here, but they're just like atoms, right? There's nothing special in here. There's no real logic in here. They're just containers for state. And then we can access these from the front end, right? Like I can consume these atoms using like the hooks and things like that we have from the front end, but the atoms themselves are updated by the service that's also living in the front end. So it's kind of like a cool pattern, and it makes it, in my opinion, it made it a lot easier to like conceptualize how I'm supposed to do state management with these things. I just treat them as containers for some state, and then I update them in my service and then access them in my front end.
It helps because I think it like tries to split and decouple things, because you have like the state that's only atoms, and then you have like the behavior, which is the service, and then the presentation, which is basically your UI that's only wiring the behavior all together with the state.
Let me see if I can find the place where I actually create the runtime. Visual effect provider. Here we go. Components. And if I have like a big service like this that I only want to like set up once, and like I have a lot of setup logic, etc., I'll usually put it into like a React context. So like here, this doesn't show like setting up the runtime. Visual effect, state, atoms. Here we go. This is the layer that builds the visual effect manager and also provides it with the sound manager, because there's sound effects. And then I build a atom.runtime out of this. And when you do this, this layer gets access to the Atom registry, which is why I can access it in my services. And then like the actual things that you consume from the front end, these like start and stop and reset things just become like very simple like definitions that you can like do. And so these hooks can then be used in the front end like in a much easier manner. Anyway, did I just see null as any? Yes, that is a React thing that I just can't be bothered with proper. I don't even know if there's a right way to do this, but like I just can't be bothered to figure out why React can't let me do this.
Well, because
they don't do they don't do context as well as we do. That's why.
I mean, you're kind of broking like they are doing that wrong because they cannot like tell with if the service has provided or not, and the only way to break that rule is to put that null as any to break the typings and say, hey, I really know that the value is there.
Don't you feel that the Jotai mental model does not synergize well with the effect mental model, mainly because atoms are singletons? I mean, it's a reactivity primitive. Like it's not. It's neither. I don't think the two are like mutually exclusive, right? Like if you want to build a reactivity framework that integrates well with front ends, I think Atom is a pretty good way to do that. I enjoy using Atom. I think it works very well. So no, I don't think that it
And
doesn't
also,
synergize well. I think it's just a different way of thinking about using effect.
and also, I would say that's not properly true that they are singletons, because really the things that are happening are inside the Atom registry. So they are more like a pointer in two entries into the Atom registry. So they are not like
I have activated
singletons.
all of the React people. I've activated every single one of them, telling me what this is how you're supposed to do it. Yes, I know you could pass null in here, or you could use a non-nullability assertion, whatever. But my point is, I'm only ever using this context in places that it's
I know that's
available.
there. Yeah.
Just because React is too dumb to tell me on the type level that this context hasn't been provided yet, unlike some really great open source libraries that can do that for you, it's not my fault. So, is effect Atom supposed to be the effect native tan stack query in a sense, the async state manager, but for effect? Sure. I think
A lot of similarities.
there are similarities, but I think it's not meant to replace or be a substitute for anything in particular. It's just a way of doing front end state management reactivity in a way that synergizes well with effect, that integrates well with effects APIs. Yeah. Just fork React, bro. Actually, there's a library out there. There's a couple. One that I thought was interesting was called, I think it was called Verex.
Yeah, something like that.
I think it's called Verex. Yes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting, and it lets you write JSX, but like using generators and like more effectful patterns, and it preserves the error and requirements from effect, which I think I haven't used this. I haven't used this at all, but I think it's pretty cool. Then obviously we've talked about it before, but FoldKit is super cool.
Yeah.
Devin's done some amazing work on FoldKit.
Unfortunately, the problem that all of the JSX based library have is the way that JSX is typed by the type checker, by TypeScript. Unfortunately, JSX, while it's compiled as plain function calls, basically, the way it's type checked is a lightweight path of a function call that doesn't support inferring and propagating generics. So unfortunately, all of those solutions like Verex we have seen before that do that, they do that by putting themselves also in the computation stack by having their own way of like compiling that.
Yeah. I am just curious as to what the fundamental differences are between Effect v3, Effect v3 Micro, and Effect v4. What were the insights that made Effect v4 build smaller, and how does it differ from Micro? It's actually funny because Effect v4, we took the micro run, or I should say Tim, took the micro runtime and retrofit it to be able to run all of Effect, and then built it out from there. So the initial version of the Effect 4 fiber runtime was micro from Effect v3. And then we slowly like improved and added and subtracted, and like it's evolved quite a bit since then. So the two don't look anything alike really anymore. But v3 micro was like the starting point for v4 almost. And that's that. Yeah. Then so that was like for speed and size of like the runtime, that's kind of where that started. But then for other improvements in the size of Effect in general, we rewrote almost every single module from scratch. Like schedule and stream and channel and metrics, and every single module almost was rewritten from scratch to be smaller and faster. I think one of the interesting learnings is that a hybrid initial encoding, hybrid final encoding allowed us to make a lot of these modules much smaller and faster. And like, what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at maybe like schedule, where are you? I think I've talked about this on office hours before. Sometimes I feel like I'm just repeating myself all the time. But where are you? Schedule. Where are you? My schedule constructor. Here we go. So a step is just an effect that returns a function that returns a pull-based effect. And so it's actually probably even easier to see this in maybe like the channel module. But the learning basically was that like a hybrid final encoding, instead of everything being an initial encoding, meaning like a set of instructions that then an interpreter executes, encoding the execution of the data type on the data type to some degree made things a lot faster. Obviously, like anytime you introduce a separate interpretation step, like you have a set of instructions and then an interpreter, it's always going to be slower than just running the thing, right? In v3, a lot of these data types were sequences of instructions that were then interpreted, right? Schedule was a sequence of instructions that were interpreted by a schedule driver. Stream was a sequence of instructions that was interpreted by a channel executor. And so for v4, we sort of did away with a lot of that. And a lot of these types now have, like I said, like kind of like a hybrid final encoding where the type knows how to execute itself. Yeah, so channel has like this transform method that it runs. Schedule has a step method that it can run. So, all right, a few more questions and then we're gonna wrap up because it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah.
What are the fundamental differences to v3? I think we talked about that already. Any plan for Svelte Effect Atom adapters? Not anytime soon, but I think we're open to that. I
think that.
I think we answered everything. There was a request in chat to look at
some repo,
a repository, but perhaps we can save this for the next time. Jack, I know you asked us to take a look at your effect project. Maybe for next week's office hours, you could pop this in the chat and we can take a look at this first. Looks like you're using Alchemy too, which is pretty cool. Let's see, just really quick. Yep, Alchemy, cool. Be very interested to look at this. Any interest in roasting the FoldKit repo from Devin? Man, that is a tall order. Perhaps if you have targeted modules you'd like us to take a look at, we can definitely do a little bit of a roast. Maybe give some feedback on things that could be improved. Cool. Yeah, Devin, next week or whenever, feel free to send us some stuff to look at. And Jack, also send us your repository again next week. Last question, is there an easy way in effect to list all the configuration errors at once? I think not, right? Since layers are built one by one. That is correct. They are listed at the time that they are executed. I had looked into whether or not it was possible to even do something like creating a custom like runner that would list out at least like the config values that a program uses, but it's not possible because you have to interpret the program to do that. It might be possible, but it's like not even worth it. For errors though, no, it's not possible. You have to interpret the config value to know if it's there or not. And layers are built sequentially. They're not, you know, they're built concurrently, but yeah, you'll get the config errors one by one. Okay, well, that was a good office hours, everybody.
Indeed.
Thank you all very much for coming and asking questions and not making us talk about AI the whole time. Appreciate it.
Speaking about AI.
Speaking of AI, I have a lot of opinions on AI. So we'll see you all next week. Come armed with questions. For those of you that we didn't get to, again, hit us up next week, and we'll try to get to you then. And in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to ask in Discord. But until then, everybody, thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you much, everyone.
Cheers, folks.
Bye.